Good afternoon, fans from around the world. It's another one of our series of episodes on South Africa politics and life in general. And today we're going to be looking at the crisis in Johannesburg, the failure of public services, as well as water and electricity, as well as the rise in drug addiction in Limpopo in South Africa. And with me this afternoon is Mustafa Jinadu. Mustafa, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so we're just focusing today. We're African Agenda, and we want to ask you to support our show. Today, we're going to focus on issues that are going on in South Africa, which is the critical country in Africa, along with Nigeria, and as far as I'm concerned, Congo. Between the three of our countries, we have minerals, we have commodities, and we have to guard ourselves from the problem of corruption and neo-colonialism, which is trying to drain our resources. So we've had a lot of problems in South Africa. There's a big problem in Limpopo and in Mpumalanga with with meth and niope. Then we have an issue in Johannesburg in which they want the mayor to step down because of lack of service delivery. What's the name of the mayor in South Africa that they want, in Johannesburg that they want to step down, Falabi? Yeah.
Oh, the mayor, hold on a sec. Gwamanda. His name is Gwamanda.
Well, yeah, which party is it? Al Jahar? What's the name of the party? So I know it's an
Al
Islamic.
Al something is one Islamic party like that, but there's an
Yeah, yeah,
alliance of civil society that are asking for his resignation.
yeah. So what are your thoughts on that? What's your angle? What do you think about that? Yeah.
Really, they have a very valid, complaint because they noticed that there's a regression in the quality of city services, and there are expressed concerns about deteriorating infrastructure, and there's disrespect towards the citizens. When there's failure of services and there's empathy, the citizens are not really so upset, but they feel they're not being carried along. It's more like a dictatorial kind of rulership by the mayor of Johannesburg. The alliance demands include a review of the prepaid electricity tariff, the water cuts, which has become a big problem in South Africa, and then they are shedding electricity load, which is affecting some communities that are not really having electricity as well as they're supposed to. And of course, there's noticeable corruption in the mayor's government as well. So basically, it's just electricity, water, and even security and crime, which we usually take it for granted in South Africa because it's almost like a way of life in South Africa. But at least expect that in a city like Joburg, crime should be, handled better in Johannesburg.
Yeah, so here's my angle. Um, the world economy is getting worse since the Ukraine war. And even before the mayor of Johannesburg, who's sitting now, was there, they've had like three or four different mayors in the past 4 years. I think the lady from DA, I don't want to mess up her name, but Impo, I think it's Palatse. She had to step down too, or even if she didn't have to step down, she was under fire. And she's now saying that she was willing to, concede that there were problems with her regime, but it seems like the problems are getting worse with this party, and it's almost like she thinks that the DA is better. And since she's talking about ANC, which doesn't have the mayor right now, but she's saying that they don't do service delivery. One of the problems that I think is that Johannesburg is it's the largest city in South Africa, but the problem is that there's no revenue, there's corruption. And I think this political corruption is not party based. So what I'm saying is that Johannesburg is run by moguls, and Gauteng province is controlled by mining companies outside of the country. And I think the biggest problem is that the revenue from mining, which Johannesburg is in Gauteng, but Johannesburg is just a financial center. It's not the productive center of South Africa. You have the mining in other parts of Gauteng, and that revenue, 72% of South Africa's GDP goes to foreign companies or out of the country or to politicians and corporate there. So my problem is that unless you have revenue that's being spent on the conditions in the city, the crime will get worse and there won't be service delivery because there's no money. The money's going into Ramaphosa's pocket. It's going to everybody's pocket. Maybe it's not going into Malema's pocket because he doesn't have power in Gauteng, but even in his area, he's siphoning money in those areas with the vendors. So my thing is that the problem is not the mayor, it's the corruption, and there's no money. Same thing in Nigeria, whether it's Tinubu or anyone else. If there's no revenue, there can't be service delivery. What do you think? Yeah.
I agree with you. What's happening in Joburg and of course the mayor too is like a microcosm of what is happening in South Africa in general. You know,
Yes.
there's business disruption because of this electricity. And guess
Yeah.
what? Foreign direct investment will be frustrated. You know, when they see that there's a decline in investment as a result of investor confidence. You know, companies won't want to come and invest in your country when they don't see transparency. You know,
Okay.
they're not inclined to want to invest in your country when the government is not transparent, especially when the government has lost its ability to provide essential services, leading to economic stagnation. And then the
Okay.
masses will become irritated and there will be social unrest, leading to
Yeah.
strikes and protests.
Okay, so that's part of it. But I'm going to disagree with you, but I'm disagreeing with you in a friendly way. Here's my problem. I think that corporations and to a less degree, World Bank and IMF have a stakeholder in South African wealth. And I think that a lot of corporations that are there that control the mining and everything, they're actually there because they like the corruption, because now they're siphoning the money out. Now, private investors may not want to come to South Africa because of the corruption, but it doesn't matter because most of South Africa's money is going to Anglo mining and also to the Guptas and other people in South Africa who represent transnational corporations. So I'm taking the opposite view of you is that South Africa it doesn't need to attract investors because it's South African land is held by British,
White people,
Belgian, and German
Australians.
and Australian entities. So what's happening now is that because those entities are taking in the yield, this is farming, this is like farming. The yield from the land is going out of the country so that now there's no money for investment in infrastructure and service delivery. That's my point. What do you think? Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you. Since a good number of this capital is being flighted, you know, to
Out.
foreign
Yeah.
countries. So
It's worse than
really,
brain drain. It's not brain drain, it's money drain. Yeah.
it's money drain. So whether or not companies from outside want to invest doesn't really affect it anyway because ill-gotten wealth is being flighted out of South Africa. And it's so sad because they're doing it in connivance with the corrupt regime in South Africa. And it's the poor
Yeah.
people that are suffering. You know,
Yes.
the
And this
peasants.
is
The
a problem.
peasants are the ones suffering.
And this is a problem anywhere we go in Africa, except for the Sahel, where they've kicked France's ass out. You go to
Yes.
Nigeria, go to Uganda, go to Kenya, go to Namibia. We have leaders
Bad
who,
as it may, it might end up, African countries might end up using the Sahel template to force this kind of imperial oppression. As bad as it is, it's not democratic, but it appears as the only solution now, you know, to many of these corrupt regimes, because most of these democratic regimes are compromised and they're working in tandem with imperial powers to loot the commonwealth of these African nations.
before I continue, okay.
So I was saying that as bad as a military regime is, it appears is the only solution now, the Sahel solution, you know, to this imperial aggression of taking advantage of corrupt
Yeah.
regimes and, you know, pilfering from their commonwealth. It appears that's the only way out now. It looks like a bad template, but it's working. You can see that all those countries, the Niger, the Burkina Faso, they're united and their people are cooperating with them because they see that the stranglehold of imperial powers over them in trying to steal their commonwealth is beginning to loosen, you know. So it's the same thing in South Africa too. The connivance of some of these external, you know, powers in trying to see what it is they can loot from the commonwealth of the people is affecting the peasants and the, you know, the local residents of the country. And as long as the regimes remain corrupt, there is really going to be no fix anytime soon, especially in a country like South Africa. Joburg is very strategic. Joburg is like the epicenter, it's like Lagos or Abuja.
Yeah,
It's like the epicenter of commercial activities in South Africa.
yeah. So the problem is that South Africa's army military
Yeah,
is controlled by it's not in alliance with Black consciousness or with the well-being of the country, unlike countries like Mali, and not Mali, but Burkina Faso and the Sahel countries. So I don't think that strategy will work in South Africa. South Africa's military
it's
basically
controlled by the
works
white
for the
people.
bank, and it's mostly run by whites.
White people, yes, yes.
Yeah, white people, yeah, and by white bank. And I would say that it's neutral. So the South African military will never turn on its people, but
Yeah,
it's not going to be helpful in this
helpful
situation.
in this situation.
South
Yeah,
Africa has a problem, like you mentioned, because they need to figure out where the control of the resources is going to come from. The only answer in South Africa at the grassroots level, people who live in villages, who live on farms, also people who live in the cities, people who live in the
province,
suburbs, have to be
provinces.
one. It
Yes,
starts with the blacks.
it's
If the
like the
whites don't
local
want, if the
government.
whites don't want, if the whites don't want to be part of it, yeah. If the whites don't want to be part of a socialist movement in South Africa, they can go to hell. When I say they can go to hell, it doesn't mean they'll be kicked out. It means ignore those guys. And
Yeah,
the Black people in South Africa and the colored people and the poor people need to come together and need to have a socialism. Here's what I mean by socialism: South African land, South African mining resources, South African agriculture. The revenue from it needs to shift from 70% leaving the country to 70% being in the country, providing even the whites who don't want socialism in South Africa, they will also be helped, whether they like it or not. But South Africa is not going to be a Western chattel anymore. And it goes to the communist movement, the student movement, the farming movement, the immigrant movement, people from Nigeria, Tanzania, all need to come together and say this land belongs for the well-being of South Africans. It's going to be difficult, and it's going to have to start with education and re-education and reprogramming, because we need to get the Western mentality out of our head.
that's why I
Going
feel
back to
this.
what you said, the problem in South
Okay,
Africa is not in Johannesburg. No, go ahead. Yeah,
no, what I was trying to say was that that's
you
why
can go ahead.
I feel this government of coalition is somewhat of a conundrum. I don't see how it will work because there are so many interests coming together. You understand? So I don't know how the cabinet will be shared
Mhm.
and people won't feel bad. I don't know how it works. It looks like a concept that is unreal.
Okay,
But they said it has happened before in
Afalabi,
South Africa.
but Afalabi, the interest, but Afalabi, the
Yeah,
interest of those guys is not the well-being of South Africans. They want a piece of the money from South African mining.
sure.
So
It's
their interests
personal
are
interest.
rubbish. The
Personal
only interest that we
interest.
should have in South Africa, the only interest it's not interest for the people, because it's very simple. The interest for the South African people is South African resources should be paying for healthcare for every South African. You shouldn't pay for healthcare, water, toilets, schools, safety, electricity. Oton, as they say in Nigeria, Oton,
Yeah.
finished. If that was the case, there would be no conflict. So it shows us that the interests are private interests of these cabinet members and of these people. All of them, Malema, Ramaphosa, even Baba Zuma, who I love,
Yeah,
all of them,
personal
Sinus,
interest. But I find it very
they
water
are all
issue,
criminals.
criminals, yes. But this water issue, I find it a bit baffling. It's been there for a while. I don't know. When you were there in South Africa, was this water problem so pronounced in a country as advanced as South
It
Africa?
probably was, but I lived in Johannesburg in a nice neighborhood, and I lived in Cape Town where there's always water. But in the rural areas, in
Okay.
the townships,
Okay, the
not the
problem
townships,
is in
but
the
in some of the,
suburbs.
I don't want to use the word townships, Yankee towns.
Suburbs. Oh,
Yeah, no, well, not the
shanties.
suburb, because there's white people live in the suburbs, but yeah,
Okay.
the
Okay,
black
like the
suburbs,
slums and the
and the shanty
shanties.
towns,
Okay, 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 okay. So
shanty towns, no
it's
water,
like a
none of,
rural issue.
and yes, and also even in the middle of Johannesburg, in the parts of the city where there's a lot of black people and immigrants, no service delivery. And the water problem is that they don't want to spend money on it because 70% of South Africa's GDP is leaving the country. So there's no money for that. So we're going to go back to the mayor of South Africa, of Joburg, not South Africa.
Yeah.
They want him to step down. If he steps down, it doesn't matter. Somebody else will come and will
We'll do exactly the same
deal
thing.
with the same corrupt mechanism, and things won't change.
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
sure.
So let's switch over now to the problem of meth and Yaope
Okay,
in
yes.
Mpumalanga and in
There,
Mpumalanga. Yeah,
there have been
yeah,
protests,
yes.
community protests against
And in
sale.
Popo.
Yeah, there have been community protests against the sale of Yaope and then crystal meth in a particular, I think it's a village called Amasemola in Limpopo. So, and the residents of that environment are really very annoyed that the law enforcement are not doing enough. They are highlighting the pervasive problem of drug addiction in the area, and the police inaction and distrust. Most of the time when they report to the police, the police just, handle it with levity. They cannot they don't really crack down on some of these drug gangs. And it's destroying the life of the young people in this community. Residents complain about police failure to effectively tackle drug-related crimes. So this inaction has led to significant loss of trust in the law enforcement. And the mothers are really, really annoyed and, they're upset that it's destroying the life of teenagers and people in young 20s. Young people are particularly affected. And the crime rate has increased, and it's really devastating the life of those young people. And in a country where healthcare is not as easily accessible, especially in places like that, Limpopo, to some people, it will just eradicate.
Physical and mental health care. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're right.
physical and mental health care. So it's threatening to wipe away, the young workforce in South Africa, and a lot of them can't even afford decent education. So economic opportunities for young people are severely hindered by drug addiction. Entrepreneurs and young workers even find their businesses and efforts to improve their lives thwarted by theft, robbery, and gangsterism. So they're really complaining and asking the law enforcement agents to do more. But then you look at some of these things, the proceeds from some of these drugs is what some of these police chiefs are feeding from. It appears that some of them are culpable. So that's why it's difficult sometimes for them to crack down on some of these some of these gangs. That's just what I like in Nigeria. People that do Indian hemp, that supply Indian hemp at a large quantity, they have cartels. They are also being sponsored and run by kingpins, that make money off them. And some of them have highly placed people in our political elite. So it's difficult to tackle the problem. It can be managed, but cannot be totally eradicated. I don't know what your thoughts are really.
Well, my thoughts are in line with your thoughts. Hold on, let me have this beer because that was depressing. So we can't blame the police, and people in the villages are using drugs. I lived in South Africa. Everywhere, people are using drugs in South Africa. It's easy to get drugs in South Africa.
No,
If you are a
can
drug
South
dealer
Africa
and you
be
get
as bad
arrested,
as Bronx in New York?
you pay. The violence isn't as bad, but the drug use is worse.
Oh, I see.
And I'll tell you why. South Africa is a country that has 400 years of violence, 400 years of violence from the Afrikaans and the British, treating Black people as animals, using colored people brought in, or using people from Malaysia and India, and turning them into criminals. And in South Africa, the drug use is a big business that's supported by the government, by foreign countries and stuff. And these people work in concert with the policemen. The policemen don't make money. So the problem, once again, the people in the villages and the townships are complaining about, like in Limpopo, are complaining about drugs. It's everywhere. They're complaining about it. And they say police need to step up. The problem is that the police are not the boss, and the police don't represent the law. They represent corporate interests in South Africa, and corporate interests represent the drug trade in South Africa. Meth and Niope are cheap drugs, and now they're making money off of poor people in villages and small rural areas. At the top, there are rich people from DA, from ANC and stuff making money off of this. And then there are transnational cartels from China, everywhere else, because meth is the green ingredients for meth are from China. The ingredients from Niobe are local or also from Afghanistan because it's an opiate. This is a big business and you can't stop it. Same thing in America. The black boys are killing each other with machine guns. It doesn't make sense to say police help us. Police is part of the police are connected to the politicians, but politicians are connected to the cartel. What South Africa needs is a revolutionary change. Once again, socialism. The wealth of the country and the well-being of the country is controlled by the people. And once it's controlled by the people, the government will have no choice but to do that. So if we want to fight drug problem in South Africa, there needs to be a cultural and social and spiritual movement at the grassroots in which the people take over their country. But it's going to involve billions of dollars for education, for consciousness, and for awareness. What do you think, Afolabi?
I agree with you. And like you rightly mentioned, as you opined in your points last time, you probably don't have that kind of money because of some other vested personal interests.
No, but here's the funny thing. South Africa has the money. So you answer the question for me. The country actually has the money, but what's the problem? You tell me.
The problem is the leaders from our little
beyond the leaders.
Do you know why I say so? If there's going to be a change
to its
I feel it's
resources,
it's going to be non-governmental and some other groups like that are going to wade in and make. I don't think the government can use money to do anything to stop or stem the tide of drug addiction in South Africa. I only feel non-governmental.
Afolabi, hold on. Drug addiction is a social problem. What other way can you solve social problems if money is not involved? Social workers, community outreach. And what's the definition of money? My definition of money is the value of the resources of the country, human and physical resources. How can South Africa solve its problem if it doesn't have human and physical resources? That's what money is. No, I'm asking you.
I understand what you're saying. What I'm trying to say is that, for instance, now, they won't give budgeting for this kind of things priority. At the end of the day, they'll tell
you. Yeah, and so that's why I said the problem is not the government. It's that there is no consciousness amongst the people. Because once the people come together, but my problem is that it's a conundrum, because for the people to become conscious, they have to become educated, which involves resources. So now it starts off with, go ahead, yeah.
And the majority of the people that are in this problem are not educated, really. Most of them are not, they're illiterate. Most of them are not lettered.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Afolabi, people in America who make $200,000 a year and they're broke and they don't realize the government is messing up. Are they educated? They're literate. They can read. There's a difference between living
and write.
They can read. So they're not educated. So we never should talk about the peasants. Unless the elite, what I mean by the elite, the ruling class. The ruling class is not the rich or the middle class. The ruling class is the people who control capital.
Resources.
What I'm saying is that in South Africa, whether you're poor or you're middle class, everybody is uneducated. Same thing in America. The world is uneducated because we're sitting down and we're watching a world war about to break out in Europe and in the Middle East. Europe, Russia, and Ukraine, Middle East, Iran, Israel, and Palestine, and all that. So my thing is that education is enlightenment. That's the word I would use.
Enlightenment.
In South Africa, the people at the rural level are enlightened, and the people who went to university and are making 50,000 rand a month, they are not enlightened. Mm-hmm. So now we need an enlightenment. But the problem about the enlightenment is it's going to cost money, because now we're putting our message out here. I have to pay for electricity for this message to come around the world. You have to pay for electricity and airtime for it to come around the world. It requires money. So this is the war that we now have. And money comes from the value of the resources. So we know that there needs to be a socialist movement around the world. And that will solve the problem of once that everybody is educated. Because once people are educated and they know what's right,
of course,
the government has to follow.
And you're absolutely right. Some of these people are oblivious to the health implication of taking some of these things.
Not only that, And they don't even realize that the reason they're taking it is because of depression and because they don't have jobs and because they don't have service delivery. That's why people are addicted to drugs. They don't have jobs, they don't have safety, their boyfriends are beating them up,
They
they
are
don't have
depressed.
they don't have access to education. They're depressed. That's why they're using the drugs. So rather than say police arrest the drug dealer, no, let's say South Africa must change so that people don't need to use drugs. That's all I'm saying.
There has to be a social change. I understand.
Yeah. But I mean, it's very complex. Then we can deal with corruption and the police. But at the root, there has to be a social change based on enlightenment. Let's look at the Sahel. They kicked France out, and they have the support of the people because they realized that France was just basically stealing um, Niger and Burkina Faso's resources, and the people were suffering. So they now know that it's because of their minerals going to France that they are suffering.
Yes,
Same thing.
yes.
The rural person in South Africa whose children are using their opiate. Their children don't have a job. They don't have anything. There's nothing to do.
They're
They're
always at
depressed, so
home,
they're using
of
drugs.
course.
So they need to say, "Oh." So what they need to do is turn their anger towards the government, and then come together as a people and say, "Let's change our governmental policies and systems." Take us out of Falabi. We've done a good show today. Yeah.
Okay, so basically,
We'll talk about the cabinet next time. Yeah.
okay. So basically, it's been a wonderful show again here from
Yeah.
Mustafa and myself. We've been discussing Joburg in crisis. But first of all, talked about the mayor of Johannesburg, who they want to kick out because of failed services, and then we talk about drug addiction as well. And it's been really enlightening from here. Um, like, share, and subscribe. We see you guys next time on Global Politics.
Thank you very much. I'll text you immediately after this. Thank you. Okay.
All right.